afternoon, and good evening, depending on when and where you are watching today's session from. Welcome to what might be our last session for the year before we go on holiday. Today's session, as you're aware, focuses on South African energy transition using the two loops model. The links for the resources will be provided in the chat box. Linda, could you just share it in the chat box below, please? My name is Leah. I'm a facilitator here at the Systems Innovation Cape Town Hub, together with Arsen, our hub lead, and Linda and Sheldon, our hub facilitators. Unfortunately, Sheldon is unable to join to tonight's event. Please note the session is recorded and we will share the link for those who could not make it. Just to give you an idea about the flow of the workshop, Arsen will introduce us to the two loops model and what it really takes to transition from an old to a new system using the energy system as an example. Linda will then present the context of the current energy system in South Africa, as well as any trends and highlights of the country's strategies and priorities. Arsen will then come back to facilitate the workshop using the two-loop canvas designed by the Systems Innovation Network. Arsen will be assisted by myself and Linda to keep the conversation going and answer any burning questions you may have. During the workshop, we will all work on the Miro board to input our ideas. We highly encourage participation in the workshop to make it rich in content. For those who can't input on the Miro board for any particular reason, we recommend that you post your ideas or any questions or comments you may have in the chat box. I'll be picking them up from there and bringing them into the discussion as we go along. Without any further delay, I would like to hand over to Linda.
To me, actually. Thank you so much, Leah. Thank you so much for that introduction. Linda, if you don't mind to give me the screen, there you go. Yeah, that was quite a good way to start the conversation. So I'm gonna, as Leah said, I'm gonna start by setting up or presenting the model. Perfect. Can you all see my screen, right?
Sure.
Great. So in the meantime, Leah and Linda, if you can help allowing people that are coming, because I keep on getting messages. Yeah, cool. So just to start, the two loops model that we're going to explore today through this wonderful topic on the energy transition in South Africa was first suggested by Margaret Whitley and Deborah Friese. They're both from the Bekana Institute. This model is applied as a theory of organizational change, and in this context, as part of a transition process for systems change. The two loops model tells the story of how systems in general dies and how new systems emerge constantly. There is no system that lives forever. So when a system gets to its peak, it also enters its dying phase, giving space for a new system to emerge. So that's what we'll be exploring today or tonight, giving the examples, picking up the example of the fossil fuel economy. We all know that first oil was discovered, then we found we could use it as an energy source. And over time, the world economy was structured around fossil fuels. The fossil fuel economy has impacted also negatively the environment that everyone is now speaking about it. They're speaking about the need to transition to a green economy. So now, often in time, when we have a conversation about systems change, we always have to start by asking ourselves where we are in the timeline of that particular system. As systems ascend, they become more powerful and entrenched. As any living system, they end up collapsing also. Talking about the fossil fuel energy system, the people who hold this system up and fight to protect it are called stewards. At the top, as you can see, at the top of their game, when they started with this whole system, life was great. The money was rolling and the economy was booming. And they try to maintain the system as best they can for what they feel is the greater good of the system they are saving. But the reality is that an interesting movement always happens right at the peak of every system, including the fossil fuel energy system. You will find that some people will drop out after realizing that fossil fuel is a limited resource. You can't rely on it forever. And these people are called pioneers. So they walk out to start a new system. And this is a radical act that they take because they are leaving the comfort of an established system. They look at the way things are and see that another way is possible. And this is how all systems eventually begin to deteriorate and start to lose their significance. As we said earlier on, we can only live off fossil fuel until it kills our climate, which we're already seeing, or we run out of it. So now what happened is these pioneers, they will start to connect to each other and build networks based on their common vision. Networks make it possible for people to find others engage in similar work. So once they build a network, then they name themselves what they want to call themselves, like renewable energy, green economy, etc. Once connection happens on a regular basis and is centered around progressive action, a new system begins to emerge. And when this happens, the dominant system is inclined to self-preservation, obviously, like any living system. They don't want alternatives. So it's important to acknowledge that when we talk about these transitions, different kinds of debates are often, and most of them are highly political, but we really can't deny the fact that change eventually happens. So something that we can't really stop. And when we have a falling energy system and you want to pioneer an emerging one, there is usually a big gap between the first and the second loop because you still have to stabilize the new one. In doing so, you need to ask yourself as a systems changer or facilitator, how do you capture and host the number of people who are falling out of the dominant system? How do you provide care and compassion to those who are dying? And we call this hospicing or hospice work. An example could be to avoid job losses to a large number of people employed in the coal sector. There's a need for investment in skills development to support the emerging energy system. And this happens while innovators are pioneering the emerging system to become robust. These pioneers, they create a community of practice through which they begin to experiment different alternatives to new emerging system. They use this community to share what they know, to support one another, and to intentionally create new knowledge for their field of practice. They experiment together as the new system continues to emerge and build. It's also a place to nourish the system, as you can see, so it can keep growing, because we all know that new system needs time, space, money, expertise, skills, etc. Once the new system is on upward swing, it hits the illumination stage, which is about making visible for those who are still in the old system to see that they can abandon that system and join the new one as it's becoming robust. This is where we tell success stories to inspire people in the old system to come over and transition to a new way of living. And that's the role of stabilizer to facilitate that transition. This is, in summary, what the Two Loops model is about. Over to you, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asen, for that detailed explanation of what the Two Loops model looks like, and also how we can, link it to the energy system already. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the energy sector in South Africa, give a little bit of context of how things look like now. talk a little bit about the current conversations around the transition, and then have a look at the system, like the different levels at which decisions are made before we can actually start going now to do the practical work, which Arsene is going to facilitate. So basically, it looks like at the moment, we are so much dependent on coal as a nation. And this conversation of transition, there are really some quick actions that need to be done if things have to move faster. Because as it is right now, coal accounts for about 75% of total primary energy supply and 88% of electricity generation, meaning that the economy, as it is running, is dependent on coal. And not only the South African economy, but given that South Africa is an economic giant in the region, there are so many other countries that are depending on energy supply from South Africa, and also many other downstream industries that depend on this energy supply. And then when it comes to the performance of the economy itself, 2.3% of South Africa's GDP comes from coal mining. And we also have income coming in from the export market from coal. And then the energy sector itself is also responsible for 80% of South Africa's greenhouse gas emissions. So basically, on like just a high level picture, this is what it looks like. We do have some challenges right now related to energy supply, where we have seen that the energy that we need in the country is not even adequate at this particular point in time, but we have this pressing push towards transition. And as you can see here, the primary energy consumption in South Africa in 2020, only 2% was renewables, and yet we would actually want this 71% to be renewables if possible. So this means that there's a lot of work to be done around that. And then since 2021, at the COP26, there was agreement that was signed between South Africa, France, Germany, the US, UK, as well as the EU, where they, having a conversation around helping South Africa to decarbonize, basically to transition to a new energy system. And they came up with what they're calling the Just Energy Transition Partnership. And this year, just a few weeks ago, at COP27, President Cyril Ramaphosa actually presented the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. And this plan actually covers three priority sectors, meaning the energy sector, the electric vehicles sector, and the green hydrogen. And this presentation was basically presenting how much money is needed for the country to actually start investing in these sectors as a way to move forward with the transition to a new energy system. So just to look at a few factors around these three priority sectors, and also just highlighting that these are just basically for us to kickstart the conversation. They are not exhaustive, and there are a lot of perspectives. This is a very complex sort of conversation with many perspectives. So there are a lot of other ideas, but just to help us, start the conversation, we need to start thinking about increasing the penetration of renewable energy sources. Like how do we harness the wind, the sun, the water into renewable energy, technologies and other minerals that we do have in the country that are helpful for the transition. Then increase, we must also look at skills development. I think Asen pointed out to this briefly when he did the presentation of the tool. We really need to look at how can we develop new skills that are suitable for the renewable energy system, the new energy system that we are sort of developing. So, and also given that there are so many jobs right now within the coal sector, what do we do with those jobs? And also in the future, what are we learning from the previous system? How do we decentralize the job market? And then around electric vehicles, there's need for fostering the overall uptake of electric vehicles in the country, but also there's what I mentioned earlier on, the reality right now is that we actually in shortage of power when we are not actually using electric vehicles. The rate at which we're using electric vehicles is still very low compared to other countries. So what happens if we then invest a lot into the manufacturing of electric vehicles, and yet we have not put in place the infrastructure to support the function of these vehicles? So and if you have to think about it, it's the way we have these combustion engine vehicles right now, they have to go to a fuel service station and get filled up. So we also need charging ports similar to that. So that kind of infrastructure needs to be in place before we start thinking about actually increasing the manufacturing of electric vehicles. And then also on the other hand, look at the transport system, the way it's actually operating right now. Is it inclusive enough? If not, what are we going to do given that we are actually moving to a whole new energy system? Are the people who were lacking transport going to actually then access it because now it has moved to electric vehicles? What does it mean for the broader society? And then thinking about the green hydrogen, well, personally, when I look at it, I think that this is an opportunity to actually now also get that income that we might actually lose from the transition, because we've been exporting energy from coal. But if we stop that, then a green hydrogen is an opportunity to replace that that income and also increase it by implementing, for example, a center of excellence in manufacturing for hydrogen products, and also targeting the 500 kilotons of green hydrogen by 2030. So these are just some pointers to think about before we get into the workshop, where we'll actually, throw ideas around related to what we are seeing is the transition is taking place. So like I mentioned earlier on, energy decisions are really made at every level. So at individual level, all of us as households, we have decisions to make. We have to start thinking about what are we going to be using as our main energy source in the house? Are we also able to charge? Are you also able to charge your electric vehicle at home? And are you able to still get the same kind of energy? Is it going to be cheaper? What's the costs? How is that going to change your life socially? All of those things that is things that we need to think about. Then at society level, there are some formalized procedures now that we need to be put in place to ensure that the transition moves swiftly and without causing, problems for everybody. So there's market forces, taxes, regulations, policies have to be made. And, you know, policy making sometimes is very complex, because you can actually make a policy that will actually may go and clash with another existing policy, and then there's fights around that. So we need to really think about what kind of policies are we going to be putting in place. And then also the environmental and societal cost of this choice that we're making as a human race. We are moving now from fossil fuel to the green economy. What does that mean for the environment in 100 years? Do we want to find ourselves in a situation where we are today, where things are just going like really fast downward spiraling, and we sort of feeling like we're not in control? What can we do to you know, make sure that the impacts on land, on air, on water, and ecosystems and people are not as massive as it is today? Then we have to think about also political processes around these factors. I think Asen also mentioned earlier on how highly political this conversation is, and there's a balance of power, especially when making decisions, even at geopolitical level, and then ideologies, corporate influence, because we know industry has played a very crucial role in contributing to the greenhouse gas emissions. So they do play a role also in trying to fix this. And so what are their thoughts, given that they are in there for the profit? And how can they continue to operate and still make profit, but still make sure that we are dealing with we do not experience the same impacts that we've experienced in the old system? And then, yeah, government structures also, these are factors that are all surrounding these political processes. So all of these things that I've mentioned in my presentation, they are not at all exhaustive of the conversation around the energy transition in South Africa, but they do show us the complexity of the matter, how multi-layered it is, the political and social contexts. There are issues, social issues, high unemployment, social inequalities. We have at this moment the people who are still not able to access electricity. So what does that mean, given that we are actually now moving from that? And even the new technologies that are coming in, how do they fit into the old system? And I'm giving an example of, for example, the grid. Which particular renewable energy source would work with what technology to actually distribute the power to everybody? So these are all really complex issues, so many ideas, so many things going on, and there's need for us to have a conversation like this, using this tool to have a picture, to get an idea of what exactly is going on. So thank you so much. I will hand over back to Asen so that he can facilitate, lead us in the practical work. And I'm sure it's going to be exciting. Thank you, everybody. Over to you, Asen.
Thank you so much, Linda. That was beautiful. Thanks for setting out that context. Yeah, so time to start our workshop now. So in the next 40 minutes, we will work together on the Mio board, as Lee mentioned earlier on, to really try and explore the energy transition in South Africa, to see.
Sorry, Austin, I see Michael has his hand up. Can you just speak before you continue?
Sorry to interrupt, Austin.
Okay.
If I may, just to add another little element into this. Firstly, thank you very much for a brilliant summary, and for Linda for emphasizing how complex this entire situation is. If I may just add one little extra element to it, and that is the two loops model to me feels very limiting, because it's binary. Yes, it's one system that's dying, and there's only one system that's emerging. There's another model which refers to the three horizons, and it says that there's one that's dying and one that's emerging, but that there's an interim solution. And if I may put on the table that we could view renewables as the interim solution, and there is a better longer term option that's busy emerging. The reason I say that is because renewables continue the same extractive mindset that came with fossil fuels. If you've done any look into renewables, the damage that they do to the planet is just as bad as fossil fuels. And so, yes, we need them in the interim, but it's not a long-term viable solution. So with your permission, if I may just stick in the chat a link to something called the 3 horizons. So you've got the red, which is dying, the green, which is the long-term emergent, but then the blue, that's the interim. And then if we could just keep in mind that renewables is only an interim solution. That's just my 2 cents worth. Thanks for hearing me out.
Okay, thank you so much. All that, Michael, it's a good point that you are raising. But I think it's important for me to clarify that we're not trying to say that the 2 loops is the only tool that you can use to facilitate transition. That's not. And in fact, that's the point I was gonna say before Leah interrupted me. But let me clarify before we get there. So the whole transition, when you start transitioning into a systems, there are various tools that you can use. You mentioned the 2 loops. You mentioned the 3 horizons, which is one of the tools that we also use. We haven't done that at the SI Cape Town yet as an activity, but we've used that to facilitate some transition processes with other projects outside the SI. The 2 loops is also one of the tools that you can use. In fact, you can decide to combine a mix of tools. You can also think of, if you want to get the dynamic and a deep understanding of the dynamics of those elements, you can apply a variety of tools. There are things like the 2 loops diagrams also can help you see those connection one action, how it influences the others as you are moving in that transition. You can also draw on the framework, the leverage point framework that Donella Meadow did. So what I'm trying to say here is, under normal circumstances, if you want to facilitate this transition process, you won't just do it in 1 hour with a 2 loops. The 2 loops is just one of the tools that we selected because we thought it's important for us to, because now in our journey as a hub, we not start talking about systems change. So we choose one. Tomorrow we might come with the 3 horizons that you just mentioned, and we can use a variety of tools. Thank you, but thanks for that suggestion. So what I wanted to say is, the 2 loops that we're going to use, we will use the canvas that was designed by the Systems Innovation. That canvas, if you see, it's got 8 steps. And those steps will help us to see if we can come to consensus about where we might be as a country in this process of change, and the best action to take at different stages as we progress. But before we get there, it would be good to talk a little bit about the canvas itself, as Linda is showing on the screen, and clarify the context in which we are using this canvas. This is a tool, a systems thinking tool that we are going to use for learning and experimenting ideas, just that, with a very small group of people. Usually you do it with a larger group. So we're having like now 10 people or 9 people now in the chat. Just to throw our ideas and imagine how this new system can look like, as now people are talking more and more about transition in the energy system. So when you're working on a systems change initiative, this tool may be useful to facilitate the discussion where we bring a group of systems changers or innovators together to imagine the steps, as I mentioned, the elements and aspects they need to take into consideration in changing the system. They form part. And that's basically the systems changes, what the system change is about. In this case, is the energy system that we are talking about. So the canvas will help us to start recognizing those places within the current South Africa energy system, and to start thinking about these different steps and aspects that we need to consider in transitioning to a new or a green energy system. There might be conflicting opinions. Michael just mentioned one here to feel that this is probably not the right tool. But when you facilitate a conversation about transition using these kind of tools, the idea is really to get people to explore what a new energy system may look like. So that's just to give a bit of introduction to that. Moving on to the Miro board. So for those who are not familiar with it, what we're going to do here is basically to grab a sticky note. We put a few there and we'll go step by step. We'll start with the incumbent system, as you see from the screen. Yeah, so Linda, maybe you can zoom a bit since you have the command of the screen so that people can see exactly where we are at when we talk about the incumbent system. So starting with that, the first question here is, what's the incumbent system looks like in these steps where we're starting? Let's try to identify that. And because of time, we're just gonna try and keep it short for each block. Let's say 1 or 2 minutes just to post ideas. We can already start dropping ideas there as we move on. Remember here we're talking about, we want to find out like what's the current energy system look like? What are the characteristics of the system? We are looking at the kind of core features of the way the system looks or works. And we're talking about systems change here, as I mentioned, which is a fundamental change. So we want to understand what are the core paradigms. The kind of ways of thinking that characterizes the current system or the dominant system. Okay. Linda, if you can zoom a bit for us to see what people are posting, because I can't really read here. Yeah, thank you so much. Coal dependent, yeah, it's correct. High carbon intensity of energy system. Harmful emissions to air and water. Little diversity of reliance on one energy source. Yeah, climate and ecological damage, definitely. Load shedding, I like that one. Load shedding. Okay, cool. So that looks good. Export of electricity core, land degradation. Expensive, yeah, that's definitely expensive. Okay, cool. Perfect. So we were trying to explore ways, the kind of way of thinking, like how the system looks like. Now we're gonna move to the second step to begin to talk about the pockets of the future. What are the pockets of the future? Pocket of the future here could be aspirational things that we want to bring into existence, or something that exists in the present, and if it develops and grows, it will create the system that we would like to see. It's like, in a way, it's like the seed of the next generation of the system. What do we think they look like? Electricity wheeling, yeah. Prosumers. Interesting. Anybody want to comment on that? Solar and wind energy. Yes.
That was my sticky note. Hi everyone. No, just the increasing role of what was historically a very monodirectional system of flow of energy, and now the increasing role, kind of bidirectional flow of energy, data, and customers taking a more active role in energy system decision making.
Yeah, that sounds like a good one. Yeah, definitely. Because that's where we now start talking about new ways of doing things, where, in this time, customers, as you mentioned, taking more hold, so which was probably different in the old system. Yeah. And these are things that we can build as seed for future energy system that we would like to see. Yeah. Carbon taxes, yeah. And carbon taxes. Anybody wanna comment? Decentralized energy market, more players,
Sorry,
definitely. Yes.
Sorry, I can comment on carbon taxes. I was just unmuting.
Yes.
So yeah, it was my sticky notes, and I just thought, as maybe as a kind of an intervention for governments to adopt more alternative fuels. They can implement carbon taxes, making fossil fuels more expensive, and thus, accelerate the transition somewhat. Yeah, so it was just an idea.
Yeah, that sounds good. Good idea.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
I can
Yes.
talk about decentralized energy markets. Basically, I feel like right now the system is centralized with very few players in the market, and that can actually cause the prices of the commodity to continue to soar high. I think if the market is decentralized and there are so many players, whoever wants to be in that business, so that it's not so much restrictive as it is right now. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move quick to step number 3, which is the emerging system. What the system starts to look like if we put together all the things that emerge from the pocket of the future. What will this next generation system potentially be like? Let's grab our sticky notes again and explore that. Step number 3, emerging system. What is the emerging new system? Clean and efficient, yeah. Increase access to energy. Open to more and new role players. Debt should be viewed skeptically, huge debt for future generation. Yeah. Can somebody comment on this? It sounds
Love
quite
to comment if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Basically, JETP, when you look into the detail of it, and it's very complicated, but essentially this is a colonialist move. It's the equivalent of a land swap for debt. It's going to be swapping South Africa and Africa's resources for debt. And I'm deeply, deeply troubled by it. So I just wanted to make a comment there. My passion is about growing carbohydrate energy because it includes the community. The only thing is that it can't be seen as an interim solution, because it does take maybe a decade to get yourself geared up to be able to generate enough energy by growing plants. Just quickly, in 2016, SAA flew a flight from Johannesburg to Cape Town, and that flight was powered by a plant called Solaris. Why are we not talking about that instead of renewables, not only on this call, but generally in the entire Just Energy Transition program? It just blows my mind. So it's a bit of a passion and a bugbear for me.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, Michael. And that's why earlier on I mentioned to say that, there are so many political processes, and even at geopolitical levels, there are factors to consider. So
Yeah.
when countries are actually coming into agreement, what is it that we know as the public, and what is it that we don't know? What is driving those decisions that we actually they now see out there? So I think those are also important conversations to have. It's really critical, and especially given that we're looking at, like you said earlier on, renewable energy technologies are also highly dependent on extraction of natural resources, which are finite still. So yeah, so
Okay, thank you.
so
Thank you.
so
Yes, somebody
yeah.
wanted to comment. I'm just worried about
Oh,
time.
okay, sorry,
We'll
yeah.
be left with 15 minutes. So,
Okay.
but very interesting discussion, definitely. New method on mining, including circular economy. Yeah, I definitely like that, because there is lots that we can take into consideration in terms of value chain that we can always build from in this transition. Electric vehicle, yeah, definitely. Cool. So let's look at step number 4. Hospicing. Let's think about how the existing system may be hospiced, in a sense, repurposed or reused, because we can't really afford for it to completely collapse. Normally, in the context of systems change, the incumbent system is there for a good reason. In South Africa, coal is supporting us at the moment. We can't really afford for it to disappear overnight. So the coal energy system in South Africa needs to be hospiced and maintained to some extent, maybe repurposed to a new system or be used differently. So yeah, let's think about that. Let's also think about the people who work in the coal sector, for example, from mines to value chain industries. How do we enable them to make the transition to a new world? So yeah, let's ideate a bit about some space work that can be done here. Tax set point of extraction, development of skills to support the new energy systems. Yeah, because we imagine that people that are coming from the old system, that are still in the old system, might not have, because they're not involved in that transition. Also, auspicing work also will mean aligning their skills to be able to fit into the new energy system. Yeah, definitely. Use infrastructure. Yeah.
I also agree with somebody put a sticky note that say use infrastructure of old system for new system, like transmission infrastructure.
But it's gone now.
Oh, okay. And no need to throw everything out. And I think at this hospicing stage, the way I think about it in the way that we people operate. When people are old or very sick, we put them in a certain space. We're not throwing them away. They are our people. It's still my mother, he's still my father, you know, and we still can actually benefit from them. It doesn't mean because they are in their decline stage, therefore we can throw them away. We still can grab something from that,
definitely
from them.
Use infrastructure of old system for new system, like transmission infrastructure. No need to throw everything out. Beneficiation, value addition of low carbon minerals at extraction point. Yes, go ahead.
So I was introduced earlier. I see Dr. Estelle has her hand up.
I just have a question. So I came a little bit late to the meeting, and I just want to understand the foundation of the 2 loops model. So where does it come from? Are these 8 elements are they interlinked somehow? Are the 2 loops somehow feedback loops? So what is the 2 loops model? I'm not really familiar with it. Could you maybe explain it?
Okay, so you know what? There are resources that we're going to share. I'm so sorry because of time. We want to get through the end, but there was a very good introduction in the beginning when we started about the two loops model. But briefly, I will tell you that it's facilitated the transition from old to new system by making sure that we balance in that process, capturing the innovation or whoever is working in the old system to still find their place in the system. Why? You facilitate a new system to emerge. We will share the recording. You can take a look because we are meant to finish in the next 15 minutes and we still have next 10 minutes actually, and we still have more block to cover because of time. So if we can quickly then jump to step number 5 here now. Yes, we've done all these steps of identifying pocket of the future. We start talking about emerging system, and we talk about how to capture the people from the old system. So now in this step now, let's begin to connect. How can we connect the new innovations? This will be like creating space for them to come together, something like that. You know, so we have all these innovations up here, and we want to see them form into a new emerging system. We want to build and develop this emerging system. Let's create space, platform, and ways of bringing these pockets of the future together to start to connect them and build them to get the emergence of a new system that can start to take over. So I guess here it's important to mention that from this stage, this transition period is starting to take or to shape up. Yeah, so let's post some ideas there based on what we've already ideated.
Yeah. Okay, I feel like one idea could be building community collaboration and trying to get communities to produce their own energy. This is a model that has worked in other European countries where villages have actually built their own power station, and then they are able actually to have extra to actually sell to either to the government or to other businesses that actually need it. And I see that as a way to make sure that everybody is actually included in the energy system.
That's a good one, definitely, right? Yeah, I see regulation, formalizing the ability for people, sector to coordinate activities. Linda, your point of building community collaboration is essential, remember? Because it's, in this case, earlier on as I was speaking, I also mentioned something like community of practice or learning hubs and, a platform for enabling collaboration, to put it like that. And this is the space where you begin to now connecting those ideas together and start nourishing them so that they can be illuminated and later on facilitates those that are still in the old system to jump in and progress. So I like that, yeah. Cool. So we have a couple of good ideas there. I saw private-public partnership, definitely. But I don't know in this case, what do we mean? Because it already exists in the current system. Maybe you mean like to revisit how they are done, maybe. Map everyone busy in this space and initiate one or more communities of practice, yeah? Cool, perfect, this looks good. I see the connection, definitely. Okay, so now that we've made those connections, how can we nourish the emerging system? How can we nourish this system to help build and strengthen it? We're trying to develop this approach to a new energy system. What should we consider? I know resources will definitely be part of it. Human resources or technology or Remember also, new system needs time, space, money, expertise, skills building, and connecting it back to the old system and providing some of the resources. How can we put all this together? How can we nourish this? How can we repurpose new infrastructure to nourish and enable new one? Grassroots education, yeah. This reminds me the point that Linda was making earlier on when she was presenting on the different levels of change and how it affects. To shift away again from the top-down approach. How do we mobilize people in the community and educate them to be able to open to this new way of living? Yeah, monitoring, evaluation, yeah. Communicating benefit and impact, learn from experiences of the fossil fuel economy, building support infrastructure for electric vehicle, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a good one, because right now we're talking about an electric vehicle, but do we have the supporting infrastructure to actually see it happen in the next 10 years or 5 years? Those are some critical questions to ask. Yeah. How do we invest to make sure that we are ready to run with it? And this also feed back to the current transportation system, the way it's structured, Is it really responding to the current needs of transportation in South Africa, and what this new electric vehicle will mean in response to, in the context of responding to the transportation system in South Africa? Cool. So totally in agreement with those ideas, definitely. Thank you so much for inputting. So let's go to step number 7. How can we illuminate the stories emerging from the different steps to the new system that we're trying to build? Remember, here we said it's about stories that will give confidence to those that are still existing in the old system to see the benefit of transitioning into a new one. Awareness raising, yeah. And this can speak to the previous point about education at the grassroots level also, and then connecting, building that space for awareness raising between those that are still in the old systems and those that are already seeing the change in the new system, or the potential for a new world in the new system. Yeah. New policies, ban of fossil fuel cars.
No, well, it's just an example. It's something that we will probably see in the future as a method to, communicate the change. So you're now forced to actually, stop using your petrol vehicle.
Yeah, someone wrote something about media. Yeah, fearlessly call out greenwashing in the media. That's nice. Yeah, it's also about freedom of speech, because if you are not in a space that allows you to raise this awareness, how are you expecting people to believe or to see the benefit of it in a change, of the change that we're talking about? So definitely, yeah. Cool. So with the 1 minute, actually running out of time now, maybe let's think of bridging, and then we can end it there. We can maybe take 2 to 3 minutes and conclude it completely. How can we build bridges from the old to the new system? By enabling the people in the dominant systems to transition into the new world. People that are working at the intersection of the dominant regime and how that function, and bridging to the new system and helping people by making that transition easy for them. New governance structures, establish creative funding mechanism where the old funds, the new, yeah. Use old infrastructure to support new system. New vehicle beds. Yeah, you want to speak about that?
Yeah. Okay. So there's some vehicle manufacturing companies that have started to manufacture just the vehicle bed, which is electric, so it can actually be moved. And VW has done that, I'm sure, for one of the Beetles and one of the Golf. They've done that. You can actually have your Golf changed, like all you change is the bed, which is the bottom, the wheels and all that infrastructure, to make it an electric vehicle. So I think that's one thing that we can actually look at as a bridge.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely a nice one, right? Because you still have your stuff from the old, you can keep it, but then you know that you can use it differently.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's fantastic. Someone posted, establish creative funding mechanism where the old funds, the new. Yeah, no, definitely. Cool. So that's sort of it. That's kind of the conversation that we're having today. I hopefully this gave you an idea of what you were talking about here with the two loops model, or we were trying to achieve, and the transition. So we started by presenting the model itself. We mentioned that it was first introduced by the Bekana Institute, and they've been using it, I think, since 2006 to facilitate transition for organization at the organizational level, and also in other systems transitioning to new systems. And we also mentioned that this is not the only tool that you can use, systems change tool loop that you can use when you facilitate the discussion around transition. But it's one of the tools that we selected, the variety of tools that we can always explore. The whole idea was just to experiment our idea, ideate together through our ideas and see if we have to envision a new system, what are the things that we need to take into consideration. So this, we all figured or noticed or experienced that the two loops model can be really useful in the transition discussion because it helps illuminate, illustrate, or identify and discuss transition processes by looking at the different aspects, elements in the process, and how those can play out when you work in a complex system to facilitate a transition to a new system. So thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. It was really great. A small team, a group of people, but great ideas. Really appreciate, and stay tuned. You will hear more from us for future events. Thank you so much. And thanks again for your contribution.
Thank you, everybody.
Well done,
Goodbye.
guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.